Hello, welcome to this. So I'm going to be talking about funding your project, photo project. Just to get an idea of who's in the audience, it might be quite nice just to briefly know. Anyone here, who here is a professional photographer, and who here is looking to fund or do a Kickstarter project or something to fund their book or thinking? So most of you. All right. Has anyone done a Kickstarter project or such like? Okay. I'll be talking about that. I will. I've done 3 campaigns on Kickstarter, which is what I'll be talking about today. So far, this was the first, which was a project I did 5 years ago, I think, and that did really well. And we got 25,000 for that. This one is finishing tomorrow, and so we're pushing it out as we speak, and that's being printed in about a month, and that so far has got 23,000, and then I'll talk about HOXTON Mini Press, which I run with my wife over there, and we launched this on Kickstarter as well. There's a kind of rule on Kickstarter that you can't launch a company or a sort of idea. It has to be a product with a kind of finite ending. So we were going to launch HOXTON Mini Press, but we couldn't. We launched the first 2 books, but actually loads of people I've seen have not followed that rule, so I don't know if it's true. And we got 15,000 from that. So Kickstarter's been great. It's crazy how much money people get on there. Not so much for photography projects, but there was a guy who was selling underpants, I think, in America, and he was making them in America, and I think he had a goal of $30,000, and before he knew it, he had $500,000 and had to make 300,000 pairs of underpants in his shed. So it is incredible. It's incredible the power of crowdfunding. It's a serious industry, and as you probably know, I think some Hollywood movies now are going to Kickstarter to try and get funding as a viable alternative from major investors. So it's serious and it's well established. So what I'm going to talk about is a little bit about my personal work, a little bit about HOXTON Mini Press, which is a company that makes photography books about East London, and then how I use Kickstarter to fund them, and then 5 of the top tips for making a great campaign. And I will talk specifically Kickstarter. There are alternatives out there, but I haven't used them, so I won't talk about them. And then I think we've got a Q&A at the end. And how long are we going for? About, it doesn't matter, right? 45 minutes? Okay. If you've got a burning question that you think is really constructive, then ask it. But maybe otherwise wait until the end, because it might just disrupt the flow slightly. So, this is just briefly dogs in cars. I actually showed it first here at the PrintspaceS. I'm going to sit down for a second. So basically, it's pictures of dogs in cars, but it's really about. It's a memory I had of being left in a car as a kid, and it was probably outside, I think Tesco's or something. But I had a feeling that no one was ever going to come back, and of course they did. But that feeling is what sort of stayed with me, and around about the same time I became really, really fascinated by animals, because they somehow didn't have a voice in the same way I felt I didn't when I was in that place, which non-coincidentally or uncoincidentally was to do with feelings I had and always carried of feeling quite anxious and quite isolated. So anyway, it all came out through this project. So this was my first major photography project, and it did very well online. Got picked up by lots of blogs, and consequently I think it did very well on Kickstarter because it was quite quick for people to pick up on it. And this was a sort of the start, I guess, of my personal journey into exploring our relationship to animals. So I think my personal work is about the completely messed up relationship we have with animals, and there's a parallel in here which is about our relationship with ourselves. I mean, these are all about feelings that I kind of didn't deal with, and feelings that we have locked away, and parallel to that is the sort of way we control and silence animals. And I think there's a sort of weird connection between our personal psychology and the way we relate to animals, which I kind of feel like I'm going to explore for the rest of my life through photography. Anyway, so that went on Kickstarter. At the time, it was only dollars, so we were forced to go through a gallery in America to get the funding, and it was just incredibly exciting to get that sort of response. I'm going to talk in detail about the campaign that's running at the moment to break it down into the components and how it works, so bear with me a bit. HOXTON Mini Press started when I met this amazing old man called Joseph Markovich standing in Hoxton Square with a plastic bag, and I thought I'd win lots of awards for photographing him, so it was a very sort of selfish impulse, and then I met him and became friends, and after 5 years we ended up going to the cinema a lot and hanging out, and I did a project about him. And as a photographer, I'm sort of partly driven by ego and partly driven by sort of the love of the aesthetic and wanting to express something that's unique, and those two things come together quite nicely in wanting to make a book. Most photographers probably want to see their name on the front of a book, and there's quite a lot of ego involved in that, but that's fine. It's also the best resting place for a project. A book is just the ultimate place to wrap up your work and say, there, put it on the shelf. So against my sort of better judgment, I made this book and lost lots of money because I printed it in London. It cost a fortune, and it sold out. It's 750 copies. They've got about 10 left of the uneditioned ones, and it sold out very, very quickly. And that gave the idea to start a company which was just making books about East London with local photographers, because I was like, well, if I can do a book about East London, then there's so many talented people here who can do great books and tell great stories. Anyway, so here are some of the pictures from the book. That was Joseph, who passed away a few years ago now. That was the view in Hoxton Square, and I met him on a day like this, where he was sort of standing there in his very short trousers in the middle of this very hip group, and I just thought he was a really nice alternative face to the kind of gentrification and the changes that were going on. So I started photographing him, and his story: he was born right by Old Street. He used to be beaten up by kids, but in a friendly way. He was full of characters, and he just had this sort of stream of consciousness that was amazing. There was a 6 foot tall girl. She was really massive. She used to attack people and put them in police vans. There was Brodsky. He used to kill chickens with a long stick. His name's Monty. That's not very common, is it? Monty Brodsky. And he never had a relationship ever. And this picture is probably one of my favourites. There's a girl walking across the reflection as I took it, which I only saw afterwards. It's kind of reminiscent of that movie Blow Up, where you see something more in your pictures than you saw at the time. And he became a very close friend, and I really loved the way he spoke to everyone and was very open-minded, and he loved graffiti. In fact, he had a different bag every time I saw him, and this was one of the pictures we took. So anyway, so after the that book came out, me and my wife started HOXTON Mini Press, and the first book was a re-edition of that project, but slightly longer, which is sort of book one in this series that you see here. And it was very much about the book as a beautiful object, and about the collector's editions come with a print. And the vision was to make a series of books that fitted together on the shelf. So I think, just a little aside about books, I'm completely passionate about photography books, is that the sort of simplistic analysis is that as more and more information is going online now, you know, you can buy your Kindle books and you can get your information for the local listings online. The things which are books have to really justify themselves as objects. You know, they have to be beautiful, they have to be touchable, they have to be collectible. So it feels like a very exciting time. People talk about print being dead, but it feels like it's just the right time to go into doing print. And I think photography books are doing quite well. The whole notion of a photo book is almost a sort of burgeoning idea that's really taking over at the moment. So if you are thinking about doing a photo book online, I mean, there is that, you know, it feels like there is a sort of wave to ride there. I remember actually going up to Chris Boot, who now runs Aperture, and I showed him the Dogs and Cars dummy, and he said, I hate it when people come up to me and just harass me. And then he looked at me and went, oh, it's quite nice. He said, don't go to a publisher, do it yourself. I did go to a publisher in the end, but there is that feeling now where you can just go out and make it happen. So Kickstarter is an enabler for that. Anyway, so the vision was to make 2 series, photographic series, illustrated series. We haven't done so well with the illustrated series, so I think we've done a lot more photography books. And also the goal with this was to make a book which had the aesthetics of a high-end photography book, but for an affordable price. It wasn't a sort of, I mean, I love this book on the right, All My Friends Are Dead, but it feels like it's a little bit throwaway, and then the one on the left feels like it says, don't you dare touch me unless you know what you're doing, right? Because you are not in this club. So we wanted to make something that crossed those two worlds, and the price meant that we wanted to print in East London, but we can't. We don't print in the UK. We'd love to, and we realised that East London Press means it should be, but we'd have to sell the books for £25, £30, and we'd rather sell and work with more artists locally and sell more affordable books. Anyway, so we launched this on Kickstarter, and that did well. And now we've done books with Zed Nelson, and that's the collector's edition. And this is about the changing face of Hackney. We've done your very own Doogie Wallace, who you probably all know, who's a bit of a character around these parts, and he did this. And then the girls on the cover came up to us afterwards and said, what did they say? They didn't want money, they wanted the book to be pulped, but it was interesting that. And then we did collector's edition. I'm guessing some of you know Doogie's work because he sells a lot on the hub here. And these are 2 books that no one knows about yet, apart from you now, which are 2 books coming out later this year. Hackney by Night by David George. Although it's a mock-up, it's not actually Hackney on the cover, but it will be pictures like that, and then Lost in the City, which is people looking lost in the city. Okay, and finally, this is what I'm working on at the moment, or have worked on, which is about, I spent a year travelling the world trying to help animals and write a book about it, which I'm still trying to write, and I came across a picture of a dog hanging from a tree, and in Spain, they estimate over 100,000 dogs every year are killed or abandoned at the end of the hunting season. And they have these sort of beautiful greyhounds that hunt hares, and then they punish some of them by hanging them from the tree so the feet still touch the ground, and it's called playing the piano. Or they put sticks in their mouths, or throw them away. Anyway, it goes on, and it's pretty grim. And it's not amazingly well known. So I thought I wanted to document this, but without being grim. So the idea was I was very much inspired by the paintings of Velázquez and the colours and the reference to the classical, because these dogs used to be noble in the 17th century. They were owned by nobility, and they appear in the first line of Don Quixote, and etc., etc. But they now get thrown in rivers like this. So I went around Spain photographing these dogs, and then juxtaposed them with the landscapes in which they are abandoned. So a dog that's been wounded, and the edge of town where dogs are released, another dog that's recovered. These are all rescued dogs in rescue centres, and an olive tree where they hang them. Another dog that's rescued, and then the well. And I couldn't really go to exact locations where I knew they'd died. And occasionally I was thinking, is this really right? Because, you know, for example, I went to this well and a man came up to me and said, what are you doing? And I was like, I was on private property. And he said, is it something to do with the dogs? And I was like, yes. He said, oh, because they found 5 dogs last year in that very well. So this is all, I'm afraid, happening. One of the smaller hunting dogs called the Budenko, and they burn them. And I worked very closely on the colours, referencing the sort of classical paintings, but also they able to work in a book as a diptych. So this is the ravine where a dog was thrown down, and it was rescued alive. And I've got a photo I can show you of a little white speck on one of those edges there. Some of the fields around the towns where they're left, and also some of the dogs don't survive out in the very arid landscape. I also saw dogs that had been killed on the railway lines, and this road on the left, I remember driving back from the rescue centre and all the traffic stopping, because there were literally like 20 dogs running against the traffic, including young puppies, and we rescued a few of these dogs, but some of the other ones got away. Okay, so let's talk about the crowdfunding. So that's what's on there at the moment. I'm just going to... Have you got any quick questions about the work before I talk about crowdfunding in particular? Because I kind of went through pretty quick. Right, so 5 of the key tips for crowdfunding. Well, I would say the first tip is to create an emotional hook. Why would someone care about your project? It's pretty obvious stuff. But you need to think about your project from a total newcomer's perspective. And that's incredibly difficult to do because you're so close to your project and it's so obvious to you why it's great and why people should buy it. But you show it to someone on the street or someone in America on a website, and they won't understand why. Well, they may not understand why they should buy it. So scrutinise it from an outside point of view, and just think like, why would someone click on this? So go to Kickstarter and look at the page of photography books if you're doing a photography book, and just look where your eye is drawn, and also ask why would someone care? What's the emotional involvement in this project? And probably more importantly, why would someone tell someone else? So for the last Kickstarter campaign on the Spanish hunting dogs, there's been a lot of supporters through the Spanish hunting dog community, people who know other people who care for the dogs. So we've been targeting the rescue centres and people on Facebook and everything else. And whereas the HOXTON Mini Press really tickled the fancy of Kickstarter people, because it's all about sort of small crafty business, and so we got most of our money from the Kickstarter community telling other people to buy the book, which is not the case in this most recent project. And then look at other people's successful projects and see what is it about them that's so interesting. So I'm going to just go dive into Kickstarter now, see if I can get just a live connection and just look at what's on there. But this is a kind of view which we're going to see, and you don't get what many of those are about. I mean, a cute hedgehog, you kind of get vidi. I mean, there's fruit. I mean, it's you have a split second, to get someone's attention, and you would kind of have to sell yourself through an image. So think pretty hard about that first image. Let me just see if I can get Kickstarter up now. Right. Okay, so I guess most of you are interested in the photography side. So this is what you see. Now, oh, that's mine. One of the things that makes a massive difference is if Kickstarter like you. There's not much you can do about that. I was told there were 2 people to email who would get you on the top, but I don't think that's true. So if they like you, then overnight you can get £6,000 or £7,000. We actually had that happen to us with HOXTON Mini Press. This got picked. As soon as it's picked, put a little logo on saying staff pick. It makes it look a bit more popular, I suppose. And then you go down to the main screen, which you probably can't see very well down there, which is probably about right, because people just flick through it. So a dog, I guess, will get the attention of dog lovers. But this, for example, isn't great. It says Spain, a photo book by me. And a new kind of photography book. I mean, it doesn't really say very much with the image, I don't think, but maybe it will do it right. It might be an amazing project. I'm just saying this front image is not very strong. And this one here, again, it's quite difficult to make out that image, and it just it's in French. So I would, again, I would. It might be amazing, but I wouldn't click on it. And it sounds a bit brutal, but you have to sort of play that sort of game, really, because you're trying to get people to click on you. And then, what else here? I mean, I immediately think this is quite a nice picture. I look at that. Organ Vida. Anyway, so and then spend time looking at the projects that have been most successful, and you can do that fairly easily. Most funded, and it shows you the top funded projects. This one got $415,000. Oh, but this is different. This is an instant 4x5 film. So let's look at the books. Cuba, a fine art book. It's got 130,000. I've seen this one before. 140,000. I think the photography on this is a bit dodgy, but it looks really tacky actually. But he's obviously done something right. I don't know. It's worth diving in and seeing what is it. What's that?
It's so relevant to the Americans now.
Oh, really? Of course. That'll be why then. Yeah. So and I got really annoyed because I saw some really bad dog photography do really well. And it was because it was all about, cute dogs and stuff, which drives me nuts. But it did well, and because they got that right, But this is interesting too, because this is Aperture, who've done really well. Major publishing company, seriously respected, and they are out there doing campaigns on Kickstarter and raising $80,000 of a $10,000 goal. They've got a pretty well-known photographer. They've got a pretty good reputation. They've got a pretty average video, and they've got really good photography. So it's being taken pretty seriously as a way to get books published. Okay. Any questions about that?
Yeah. How important is doing a video?
Like 1,000,000%. I mean, you just got to do it. I don't know. I'm not a Kickstarter scientist, but I am pretty sure that if you don't do a video, you probably.
That Cuba one didn't have video.
Did it not?
I think so.
Oh, well, then I'm totally wrong.
Yeah,
I'm suspicious about this. I think he must know someone in high places, because it's really dodgy photography and he hasn't got video. And it goes against everything I'm saying, so he must be wrong.
Perhaps he's going to raise more with a video.
He probably would have raised $1 million. But it's a weird world as well. I mean, you can't really predict it. There was a guy who went on with an ice box and said, "Here's an ice box," and it basically had an elastic band around it, and you put speakers in the top, and he was like, and it has a light inside. I mean, it was kind of like GCSE level sort of design, and he went on and he didn't get any money for it, and then he went back next year with an even cooler icebox, and he got $1.5 million. and it had a cigarette lighter on it or something. So the point is that it's just very difficult to totally predict exactly what will happen. So, creating an engaging video. I think that the video is probably, we spent probably 90% of our effort and money on the video. And it's not about making something slick. It really isn't. It's about making something watchable, which has an emotional hook. So I talked about that earlier. It's like I should probably expand on it a bit more. But for example, the dogs in cars. I'll show the dogs in cars video first. The dogs in cars, right? You now know what the project's like. So you're a little bit in my shoes before the Kickstarter campaign was launched. If you haven't seen the Kickstarter campaign, what would you do? And so we were in this position, and we were like, we can show lots of nice images and say, here's a nice book. But then the guy I was working with on the video was great, and he said, no, what's the project really about? And I was like, well, I suppose it's about this memory of being locked in a car. And so that was like the first bit we put in there to get people sort of emotionally connected to this project. It's not just pretty pictures of dogs. So let's look at that video quickly. Try not to make your videos longer than 3 minutes, which sometimes I fail to do. I can go somewhere on here to... I just want to quickly check if the funding's gone up. It's got a little bit, there you go. And so you go to dogs in cars. So that's 2 minutes 20. So it's just really something quite honest. I think that is quite slick, but it doesn't need to be. There's lots of other videos on there that get a lot more money, and people just sort of like bouncing around in their bedroom. But if it's honest and people believe you, I think it works. I had much more trouble doing the video on the Spanish hunting dogs, because I'm not very good at sort of, I wrote out what I wanted to say, and it just came out a bit flat, so I had to redo it about sort of 5 times. But it's worth looking at this one. So again, it's like how do you get people? How do you get that little hook at the beginning? And in the end, I think we just said something like, "I couldn't believe the story when I saw it," just to make it sound a bit more interesting. So I think that it's all right, but it's a bit long. It's 3.5 minutes. Probably some of you were sort of drifting off. So aim for something less than 3 minutes, I think, and start with if there's any formula, but there isn't. But I would say start with an emotional hook, go straight into saying what this project is and why people should want it, and then at the end just ask people for support and be really open and really honest about it and believable. So there has to be that emotional sort of integrity to the project, I think. Any questions about that?
Are you doing any donating to charity?
Yeah, I am. There's a rule in Kickstarter that you can't use it for charitable giving. So you can't, raise money for your run across the Sahara or whatever,
I was just wondering.
But actually,
as your hook.
Yeah, and I felt there are people who do use Kickstarter for charity, so I don't really understand it. You're not meant to, but you get away with it. So, but I have said that 10% of all the funding minus the fees, the postage and the Kickstarter, go directly to the dogs. But I felt a bit torn about this because I'm saying give me money, and that I'll show you the figures in a minute. That won't even cover the costs of the project and the printing. But I feel like the dogs need the money, not me. You know what I mean? They don't have a place to live in East London. They live in a well. So I'm a bit torn by that. But I'm not trying to say that I'm going to solve this problem. I'm just saying that maybe the art book will bring awareness in a new way to a problem which needs a load of awareness. Okay, so going back, any other questions? No? Yeah.
The time, it says 39 weeks. Is it hours?
30 hours to go.
Who sets the timeline? Is it like eBay, you pick how long you need? Or
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to talk a little bit about this, but basically you should do 30 days or less. The temptation is to do loads of time, but people lose interest over more than a month. So I would do 20 to 30 days. And once you've set it, you can't go back. And once you've set your goal, you can't go back either. Your goal is how much money you need or want to raise. You can't go back. We'll talk a bit more about that.
Can you repost your
Yeah, you can repost it. You can put the video back up. You can change things. You can't once you've got a pledge. Pledges are what you ask. You ask on the right hand side. I'll show it to you now. Let's look at this. Hang on. So these are the pledges down the right hand side. So this is what someone sees when they go on. They don't see this on the left, but they see this page. And then the rewards, not pledges, sorry, is and I think they have to call it rewards because technically someone can give you money and you can then take it and go to the Bahamas and not come back. So you are not in a legally binding agreement to give them anything. It's a reward. So they're putting faith in you. And they can pledge £5 for a thank you, which is basically, that's not a very fair deal, is it? £25 for the book, early bird special, £32 for the book, non-early bird special, and I'm going to talk you through this a bit about how you should break up your pledges, because it's really important that you have a nice scattering of pledges that don't jump from £20 to £2,000, because you get a lot of people, a kind of bell curve of people pledging across different amounts. And anyway, so you click on one of these, you want to buy the book, and then you send the money, you'll put your credit card in, and the money is reserved, and it's not taken off that person's credit card until the end of the project, only if the project is successful. So if it's not successful, you don't get any money at all. This is the crucial thing about Kickstarter, is that I feel I should have probably explained from the start how Kickstarter works, but basically you say I want X amount of £1,000 for a project, and if you don't get the money, you don't get anything, and if you do, you get all of it. So you have to hit your goal, and in return you give people a series of products or books or tickets to the opening or a thank you. So let's just go on to the figures. Where am I? Okay, probably the most crucial thing and the most difficult thing is getting the figures right on Kickstarter. Has anyone got any more basic questions about how Kickstarter works? Yeah. No, you sorry, lady in the blue top first.
Once your product is funded, how does the payment process work?
Once it's funded, you will receive, I think it takes about 2 weeks for them to process it. They then take off some money, which I'll talk about, and it gets put into your bank account.
And tax-wise, you then?
Tax-wise, it's like you earning any money freelance. You have to declare it, but if you're, in theory, if you need the money, and you're spending the money, then you've got a zero tax balance. So if you're making a profit out of it, then I suppose you have to pay tax on that.
Is there a time lag between when you post the project and then actually goes live?
You post it, and then they have to check it, which normally takes about a day, and they say you're ready to go, and then you can hit go live, and it goes live immediately. We'll talk about how to promote your work, and we'll talk about how to make the pledges and how to choose your goal figure. But let me just quickly talk through the figures, because they really trip you up if you're not careful.
So first of all, work out how much money you need. Okay. So what's the minimum amount of money that you need to make your project happen? So if you're doing 1,000 books, how much will it cost to print them? Do you need any more money to distribute or to promote or to even do the project? And then take into account how much. Oh, sorry, that was not money. How much money you might put in yourself. So don't just say, well, ideally I want £50,000 because you probably won't get it. So think, what's the minimum I can do to make this project happen? And then crucially, take into account postage, because that's what kills people on Kickstarter. The Dogs and Cars book got that $35,000, £25,000 about, and then we had postage, and the postage, I can't remember now, but we're talking £2,000 or £3,000 for posting out 450 books around the world at an average of £6 a book, including the packaging and stuff. Now Kickstarter is different. When people pledge for something, say they choose £40 to buy a book, they then have to put on postage, and you can choose how much that is. But the amount that they give you will include the postage, and your total amount of money that you get will include how much people have put towards postage as well. Okay? So, if you get £10,000 from Kickstarter at the end, right, then they take off their fees, which I think are 4 or 5%. Then there's credit card fees, which get taken off, I think about 3%. And then you have to pay for the postage out of that, which might be another 25%. So you may end up with only 70 or 65% of your total. So if you get £10,000 on Kickstarter, everyone goes, oh wow, you got £10,000. You might end up realistically with £6,500 to spend of that. I'm going to give you a little example here. Okay, so how much money do I need to publish? I'll come back to you. Sorry, someone put their hand up. Who was someone? I'll come back to you in a second.
What was the percentage that Kickstarter?
Sorry?
What was the percentage that Kickstarter?
I can't remember. I think it's something like 4%. Is that? I don't know, something like that. Okay, so for example, how much money do I need to publish my photo book? Let's say we're doing 1,000 books, and the print cost is £8 a book, so we need £8,000. Let's say I want money for film and other shoot costs of £2,000, and let's say I've got personal cash available of £1,000. So the funds needed for that are £9,000. It's fairly straightforward. But now you have to add in the hidden costs. So the Kickstarter fees plus the credit card fees are probably about 8%, but let's just call them 10 to make it safe. So of that £9,000 raised, £900 will be going to Kickstarter and credit cards. And then postage fees at 25% of total raised will be £2,250. So then your Kickstarter goal is your £9,000 cost plus your £2,250 postage plus your £900 fees. So then your Kickstarter goal is £12,150. I mean, maybe the maths aren't exactly right, but it's something like that. So you have to basically, as a rule of thumb, assume that 25 or 30% of your final goal is not going to be yours if you're doing a book, which I think most of you probably are. Okay? So, again, if you're including the items sent out by post, 35% of your total can go on the post and the fees. Okay? It's a bit of a shocker, really. Any question about that? Did you put your hand up? No? Sorry. And the second trick about Kickstarter, you should aim quite low. So what I need to balance the books on my Spanish hunting dog is I need £30,000. That actually sounds a crazy amount of money, but you take off the postage and everything else and the shoot cost and everything. But you always aim lower because you aim for the lowest you possibly can get away with to actually make this happen. And I was like, well, I'll just put the rest of the money in myself. Because if there's a fundamental flaw in Kickstarter, which is that people think that you have to, the higher your goal, the more likely people are going to want to pledge to get you there. People don't really care if you've hit your goal or not. They care if your product's good. So people are still pledging for mine because they like it. They don't go, oh, he's hit his goal. It's not always true. I think sometimes if it's a charitable project, people think you've got what you need. But generally, aim as low as you possibly can. Don't aim too high.
So you aimed yours low, knowing by previous experience you'd get more than if
No, I didn't know. I
You
thought.
both did.
No, I said if I get 10 grand, if I get 10 grand out of this, it's much less than I need, but I'll take it. Whereas if I'd got sort of 9 or 8 grand, it wouldn't have been sort of worth even going with it. So you aim to the lowest point you can. So pledges should be evenly spaced out. So as a rule of thumb, try and aim for something like a £10 pledge, because there will be people who want to give £5, £10 for goodwill, even if they get nothing back in return. And then jump to say 40, which typically would be your book. 70, and I made a mistake with my latest book. We actually started going into sort of like planning for the printing and designing, because we knew we were going to go ahead with this, and actually didn't have the opportunity to say to people, if you pledge an extra £20, you get your name in the back. And that's just a simple no-brainer for a photo book. People will always pay an extra 10 quid, 15 quid for to have the name printed in the back, and it's so easy to put a page on it in the book with people's names saying thank you for Kickstarter. I did it for Dogs in Cars. And then £100, you might do the book in a print. £250, you might do a large print. £500, I'll come to your house and photograph you for a week. Sounds kind of scary, isn't it? £1,500, I don't know. I will give you my dog. So and etc. So it's quite important that you fill those. Don't get too clever with it, because we started thinking about doing packing 400 books is a bloody nightmare. You think it's not much, but it completely takes over your house, and probably 3 or 4 days of solid packing, getting the labels wrong, doing it again. If you fill out half of this room, and if you have to send out and you decide you're going to offer for £5 more an acetate plinth with a handwritten note or something, you're going to be kicking yourself, because you've got to send it. And another simple mistake: if you're going to send out a print with a book, don't make it bigger than the book, because if it's bigger than the book, you have to send out a separate tube 400 times, and you could add £2,000 to your bill. So prints with books, if possible, should be smaller than the book, so they can go in the book, and just keep it simple. So, for example, I stole off the Aperture example that the guy sold a previous book of his on Kickstarter. So at the last minute I put buy the Dogs in Cars book and the latest book for less than the two together, and I think we've got 58 pledges of that, and that's selling for £25. So that's an extra £1,500 just from that one little idea. So you can just think about little add-ons, and you can make quite a lot from that. Okay, plan your campaign in advance. Ideal campaign runs for 20 to 30 days. Any shorter, you may not get enough money. Any longer, people get bored and pissed off. You really drive traffic with online marketing and plan before you start. You kind of need just to have a very, very long list of blogs, Facebook, Twitter, friends, family, etc., and you'll be amazed. It's actually things like Facebook and Twitter that is the engine, actually. So you really got to get on Facebook and post a link and get people to share it. Send out emails. Target blogs. Although, this was recently on its NiceStat, and it got about, 3 book sales on it, whereas we get more. But then, weirdly, we put it on Bark Post, is that right? Bark Post, which looked a bit crap, and then someone spent £2,000 on a print, so you just don't know. And there's a kind of push at the beginning, and then you sort of let it run for a while, and at the end you go crazy again, pushing again. So think about, you need to have an Excel spreadsheet of about 80 people and places that you're going to push this. And you need to probably, to run an effective campaign, allow 3 solid days a week to be doing it. So you might want to factor that into your costs, for example, because if you have an assistant or something, you have to pay them. It's a serious endeavour. So there you work 3 days a week on your campaign, and there is a sort of a dip in the middle of your earnings almost always, and there's it's like an S curve, or if you're a photographer in Photoshop, a reverse contrast curve. So this is typically what happens. You get really excited at the beginning, and then it still feels great, and then you suddenly get panicked and depressed, even though you hit your goal, because you think no one likes your work, and then it goes up a bit, and then it flat. I remember on HOXTON Mini Press we had one day where we actually lost money, which was incredible. Someone pulled out, and it feels like they hate you. And then this is where we got people buying prints suddenly, and so there's always a spike at the end. And there's this really stupid website which is really fun called kicktraq.com, Kicktraq, which is completely pointless, but it's great because it says to you how much money you're going to make, and it predicts the future. So it said at the beginning of the Spanish hunting dogs that we were going to hit £60,000, which is a really good ego boost, even if it's a lie. And then all it actually does is it looks at where you are now and where you were and draws a straight line and projects it into the future. And it's not really how it works. So, but here's another project, something we know. And again, you can see the S-curve. Big at the beginning, flat, and then at the end, there's a panic and you get your family to fund you personally and all that. Anyway, so, and that is the other thing, if you don't make it, you can just reach into your personal account and pretend you're someone else, put the money in, hit your goal, and then you lose 10%. Which is a way of giving yourself money without giving it to yourself. Okay, so any questions about funding and... Yeah.
Are the pledges final or they become final? Is it paid by the pledger or immediately?
No, it's not, and that's what's a bit scary, because I pledged for a... Yeah, well, it's a bit scary, because in theory it's money in pocket, but it's not. It's people's sort of hands in your pocket that they could take out any minute. I pledged for a pair of socks on Kickstarter the other day, and then it wrote to me saying, your credit card is bouncing or something. Your socks will not arrive. And I could have just said, I don't want the socks, but you had to go back on and redo it. So there will be people that will drop out because their credit cards, they change their mind because their credit card doesn't work or something.
They can change their mind at the final moment?
They can change their mind at any point. Yes, they can withdraw their pledge.
Yeah, so then how does it work then? At the end of your campaign ends, and then does Kickstarter contact all and say...
No, Kickstarter takes the money straight away. It just takes the money. It's like a shop. It just takes the money. But if someone's card doesn't work, they write back to them saying your card hasn't worked, at which point the person can just be like, well, I won't update it, and they don't pay for it. But if their card's working, the money goes straight away.
Okay, so they're not likely, like 2 weeks later, to pull out and say...
No. Kickstarter doesn't send a message saying we're about to take your money, which is great, because if they did, you probably would have a lot of people pulling out. So... People who pulled out the project actually went, that thing I spent money on, I really don't want them to have the money. And they looked for me and they took the money away. So that's what happened. Yes?
What happens if at the end, even though it says you pledged, like if you've only just made it and then their cards decline, would it then still, even if it's...
I don't know. That's a kind of fringe situation. I actually met someone who did a PhD in Kickstarter, and he would know. But he's not here, so.
How many people subscribe to your examples of your own books? How many people...
404 backers, the Dogs and Cars. And, should we see if we've got any more money? That's the other thing, it becomes completely addictive. I have my mum ringing me up saying, I just checked, 20 minutes ago you didn't have this and now you got this. I'm like, why are you following my Kickstarter campaign because it's like sort of crack cocaine. So just let me get my hit quickly. So you go on because it's the last.
Do you specify how many books you're going to print?
What? No, because I mean this is actually done with a publisher, so it's going out anyway. It's going out anyway. Why can't I see this? So no, it hasn't gone up. Okay. So it's going out anyway. So we were going to print 3,000. But you could do a project where you say I'm only going to print as many as the Kickstarter people pledge, which is quite a good line because it means that you've got to buy it on Kickstarter, else you won't get it.
Because if you get too many backers, you're not a problem.
Sorry? If you get 2 backers, well then you won't get your money.
If you get too many backers with a limited edition, then you won't.
No, because when you make it here, you can say if it's only like this one. I did a reward here, which was early bird special, and you can limit it. So if you've got a limited edition of 500, you can't let people sell more unless you're really clever, and then you can. So that's that.
On the crowdfunding with your publisher, how does that work?
Yeah. It's a bit of a weird one actually because I don't know how I feel about it really. I understand it. It's I mean I know quite a lot of these publishers and the business model they have is they cannot fund the book themselves. You know, they do need investment as a sustainable business. So you will probably, unless you're very famous or making a book that's going to sell a load of copies to non-photography buyers, will probably have to go to a Kira or a Dowie Lewis or Aperture and probably have to bring £10,000, depending on the size of the book.
You're looking to raise that money for them.
So for the Dogs and Cars, I did that, yeah. And then for this current project, I've had to put in £10,000 again for the Spanish Star Hunting Dogs. But he knows, I mean, Kira, they know me and they know the books will sell, so they've lowered that from about 15,000, what it should be. And then, but on top of that, there's the cost of. I mean, that's not the only cost. I've got to, go to Germany twice. You've got to. I mean, the cost of the project. I mean, there's so many other costs involved in making a book happen, rather than just the printing, that you should really think about.
Where would you print the book if you said that everything you're printing in the UK is very expensive? Where is the...
Well, okay, so just to confuse you, my personal work is not. I don't print it because it's not East London, so it's not HOXTON Mini Press. These books, HOXTON Mini Press, we publish ourselves, me and my wife, and we print those in China, and they're printed on the same Heidelberg presses, the same technology, the same inks, the same paper, but they're just cheaper, and we would love to do it in East London, but we went and looked at the prices in East London and they were 5 times higher, which is, it's we were like, either we can work with a local printer and it'd be great, and do 1 book a year, or we could work with 10 local photographers and do 10 books a year. So.
Sorry to go on about the publishers. Do you have to put it on Kickstarter? Do you have other publishers on board?
No, you don't have to say anything. No, you just, this is how much money I need to make the project happen. But anyway, my point was that I feel a bit funny about it because when we do books, we don't ask for any money from our photographers, but then again, we don't make any money from our books. So maybe there's a flaw in our plan. So I'm working sort of 5 days a week, but not really drawing a salary from this, so it's not great. So maybe we will have to start asking people to put money towards printing some of that. I don't know. Anyway, we need to finish up soon, I guess. So this last thing is about engaging the community. And someone said to me, actually, this guy who's got a PhD in Kickstarter said to me, the key word in crowdfunding is crowd, not funding. And I guess the obvious point is it's about the community of people, and if you can work the community, then a lot of pledges come from within the crowdfunding platform. Let me just quickly show you, because Kickstarter does this quite cool thing where you can really see exactly what's going on with your funding. So, for example, here you can check your dashboard, and it tells you there that that's how much money's come from Kickstarter, and that's not very much, actually. Normally we get much more from Kickstarter, so that means that people don't really care that much about this project on Kickstarter, but they do care about it in communities outside. So there's a lot of photography and a lot of dog people who care about it. Okay, so we've got far more money from outside of Kickstarter. And then it tells you the biggest referrer is Facebook. 25% of the people have come from Facebook, and they've pledged £6,000. And then direct traffic is 92, and they've pledged almost the same. So Facebook is just about the highest driver of both money and people to the project. But if I go to look at another one of our projects, for example, HOXTON Mini Press, which is something that sort of is much more Kickstarter orientated, I guess, then if you look at the campaign on this, you can check the dashboard on this, you can see, this, by the way, so it would have been an S-curve. This was when we kind of went to sleep and then woke up. It was about £3,000 overnight, and that's because it got recommended by the Kickstarter peeps. They sent out an email saying this is a cool project to all the Kickstarter people, and suddenly we got £3,000 in a matter of hours. And there you can see that most of the money there is from Kickstarter and not so much from outside. So I don't know what that means. Well, I do know what it means. It means that you want to get projects that people can pass on via email, Facebook, and within the Kickstarter community. Okay, so almost finishing up now. I can never get this thing back. So one of the ways to get people in the community to stay in touch is to give regular updates. When you post a project, you can write emails to all the people that have pledged and all the people that see the page saying, it's great, we're really happy, here's another picture. You can update your campaign. So if you hit your goal, a lot of people do something called a stretch goal. You hit £10,000 and then you go, wow, now I'm going to get £20,000. To do this, I've added another reward, and it's going to be an extra size print only available to people on Kickstarter. Or if I hit £20,000, I will send everyone who's bought a book another copy of a smaller book that I did last year, etc., etc. I was really uncomfortable about doing this for my book because I was like, I've asked for the money, and then I was like, I want more money when it's really about the animals. So that was difficult, actually. And then keep in touch after the campaign. I mean, it's great because not only do you get the money from Kickstarter, you get a list of 400 people who you can then email a year later saying, I've done a new project. And they are probably going to be on your side. And that itself is worth thousands of pounds. So look at the sort of bigger picture on that. That's it. Good luck. Has anyone got any questions? Just to say that we're doing, if you do want books, you probably can't see it there. All these books, HOXTON Mini Press, about East London, we're doing for £10 instead of £12.95. Collector's editions come with a print. There's only 250 in existence of each book, and they're doing for £35. Silence of Dogs and Cars is £20. I've only got 3 copies though. And then, if you want to pledge for the Spanish hunting dogs tonight, last night of the campaign, and you want to get the book and the Dogs and Cars, and this hasn't been sold for about 2 years, we've got about 10 copies left of the very first edition, which I'll give for free if you want to pledge, but you have to do it online now. Right, that's it. Any questions?
Your HOXTON Press, how easy was it to find good printers that you could trust when you're on the other side of the world?
Well, I've just come back from printing this book in Germany. We actually went down and we've gone and just printed it. It's not ready yet. It's being bound. And even there, in this incredibly fancy press, with it's difficult to get it right. It's an art form. I don't know if anyone you know how these sort of CMYK presses work, but the 4 plates come down, and then someone has to just check the level of black and magenta and cyan to make it right. And we've got great results from China, which I would say are comparable, if not better, than some fine art publishing in Europe. The difference is that there's a bigger range of papers in Europe, and there is that's it really. It's the same printing, so it's not easy to control a book ever. The disadvantage of China is you can't go on press, but I don't know how much better that makes it, to be honest.
Do they send you things like first? Do they send you a book to have a look at? Or
Yeah, the way basically it works, you send them the PDF of the book, they send you back what's called plotters, which is a sort of an outline of the book in electronic form, or sometimes printed out on a laser paper, just to show you the order and make sure it's correct. You then say OK, and they then they start printing the book, and they send you what's called running sheets, which are actually taken off the press. And then you look at it and go yes or no, and if it's no, they have to reprint the whole book. You can get proofs done over here, which you send out. It's very, very costly. Colour management is a total nightmare for every aspect of photography, and if anyone, either at the PrintSpace or anywhere else, tells you that it's a science, they're lying. It's a nightmare, and no 2 screens are ever the same, and no calibration device ever is the same. So you will not get back prints that look like your prints, because it doesn't exist. So you've got to get a handle on that. You're going to get back books which look, we say this to all our photographers, it's like, it's not going to, the dogs and cars, it doesn't look exactly like the prints I've done here or at home. So.
Who's your printer?
Sorry?
Who's the printer?
We use a printer at the moment called Winking Tong. Nothing wrong with that name. And they're great. They all have the worst websites in the world. But they probably, I'm afraid, they might do a one-off book, but they're not probably going to do. What I haven't talked about at all is distribution. If you do 700 books and you get 500 people buying them, you're left with 200 books in your front room. It's not easy to get rid of 200 books unless you go in person to the shops and sell them in person. But then you've got to make invoices, and you've got to chase up invoices. You've got to keep a track of it. Distributors, whose job it is to get a pile of books into the hands of the buyer, the client, the end user, they probably won't take someone on who's got 1 book. So you're not going to get a distributor unless you're very lucky, because they're not interested in someone with a single book. They want someone who's done 10 books or 20 books. So think hard about what's going to happen when you get back 700 books. My advice would be do the Kickstarter campaign, see how well it goes, and then adjust your print run accordingly and add on maybe 10-20% if you think you can ship them afterwards through your website, but otherwise be careful. The other thing about printing photography books is you don't want to use litho printing unless you're doing more than about 1,500 copies. It's not really cost effective. Under 1,500 copies you can use Indigo, which is a new digital form of printing which is very, very good. And below 500 copies you start really, it costs a fortune. So 500 copies of a book may cost you £4, £5 a book. 1,000 copies may cost you £2.50 a book, and 2,000 copies may cost you £2.20 a book. So it drops off significantly around the 1,500 copies mark. Yeah.
How much easier was it the fact you had a publisher? Would you have done it if you didn't have a publisher?
I wouldn't have done it. Partly from an ego point of view. Ego was always a big driver for me. I really wanted to have my name in lights, and I thought if I do a self-published book, that's real vanity, But I don't think that's true. You know, if it's a good book and you want to see it out there, then just do it yourself. You know.
So if you're only sending it to people who pledge the money, it's not really out there in the general.
No.
It's not out in shops, is it? So what's the purpose of it? If you're only giving it to the people who pledged on the Kickstarter campaign.
How's that different from selling in shops, though? There's still just people.
Yeah, I suppose it's not. Yeah.
You know, if you get 10,000 people, and you have to ask yourself, why are you doing a photography book? You know, is it self-validation? Is it insecurity? Is it money? Well, it can't be money because you won't make money out of it. What's the reason you're doing it? And you should be honest with yourself. And if it's because, you know, and I think one of the things I'm uncomfortable about is there are publishers out there, you know, not the Kiras, the Dowie Lewises and stuff, but there are publishers out there who are basically making money out of people's insecurity because people think if I get published, then they've made it. But I'll take £1 million from someone right now and I'll publish your book. Doesn't matter how bad it is, you know, it's going to be out there. So that kind of thing is what you want to avoid. You want to avoid people who just take your money. So be a bit careful about that. Yeah.
I'm really sorry. I've got the book, The Old Guy. I can't remember his name.
Joseph Markovich.
How did you persuade him, or how did the conversation come about that you wanted to make the images of him public? And how did you go along with it straight away?
He went along with it. He was an incredibly open guy. He went along with it straight away. And I remember when I first was photographing him, someone walked past me in the street and said, "You're a fucking cunt." And I looked round, thought, I didn't say anything, and I thought they're looking at me abusing an old man for my own artistic gain. And I thought, is this what I'm doing? And I think a little bit was, yes, I was trying to take pictures. I thought his wrinkly face would look great in the National Portrait Gallery, but actually quite quickly I realised that I was genuinely quite close to him, and we became really had a really special friend, and he trusted me and I trusted him, and all the money from that project, at least for the first 5 years, went to him. So he got new shoes, new TV and everything. So he was very trusting of it and very happy about it, but he also didn't really care. He just wanted to tell me about Johnny Depp's love life, because he would read books about the life of he'd read out-of-date magazines in the local library about the life of celebrities. So he was a pretty unique character. So he was great. He was very trusting to everyone.
Yeah, I think that comes across my
Yeah.
Just the relationship that you
Yeah, he was very, very, very trusting.
I get that you've done the book as a non-profit. I guess you've done it for the love of getting your work out there and everything. But has it had an impact on you as a photographer and therefore helped you in other areas? Is it really just a hard artistic love for you?
Has it? I don't know. I think the Dogs and Cars, I think having a book, what it does is it really solidifies your purpose and it really focuses you. I had about 15 images from that series, and I don't think if I didn't have a book, I wouldn't have made it into a project. And if it wasn't a book, I don't think I probably would have had the dealer in America who sells my work, and I wouldn't have had the shows I've had. So it does give a platform for you then to progress your career, I think. But this idea that you're suddenly going to get loads of work out of it is not true. I've heard people say that if you have a book, you can double your day rate. I don't do many shoots, for a day rate at all. So I'm too busy doing this. So it doesn't really, basically. Anything else about Kickstarter that I can help you with?
I was just wondering, what's the smallest print run and the smallest budget you can do a book with? What's doable for us?
All right. Okay. So I printed 750 copies of this, and I used a company in London called Push Print, who are brilliant. Push Print in London. They're brilliant, but really expensive. And they do great things. They're nice, and you can mention me, and they know this book, and they wanted to print more, but it cost me something like £4.50 a book. Hardback, you can do smaller book, you can do paperback, it's probably going to cost you £3. 750 copies. If I'd done 500 copies, it would have cost me something like £5.50. This was, 5 years ago, 6 years ago? Whereas printing abroad probably costs you a quarter of that. So that's how much it's going to cost you. So £5 times 750 copies, whatever it is, you might be spending, say, £4,000 or three, whatever. And then, so that's the printing cost alone. But then you've got any other costs involved in the project. So probably the answer would be £3,000 or £4,000 if you want to print well in London. Yeah.
Is this CYUK?
This is litho printing. So litho printing is the kind of considered the Rolls Royce. Well, it's the traditional printing. Curiously, you can't get as good quality prints as you can from an inkjet printer. Why they don't print books on inkjet printers, I don't quite know. I think it's too expensive or too slow or something. But they basically use CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, black, and they print, and that's how newspapers are done and how books are done. Whereas the inkjet printer downstairs does light magenta, dark magenta. It has 11 colours, so you get much better prints from the print space than you do from spending a lot of money on the printers are about 30 metres long, and they cost about £1.5 million, and they produce things which aren't as good as your Epson £200 printer. But that's just the way the world is at the moment. I think it will change. I think in about probably 5 to 10 years, I think that you'll be able to print 250 books for a lot less, and they'll be a better quality than we can get at the moment. But that's some ways off.
What was in the litho printing a book, which is have a longer lifespan than inkjet print?
I don't know. I mean, I've seen some books really yellow up, but it's partly because they're closed. I think if you leave it out, it yellows pretty badly. In fact, I know that if you have glossy paper, it often has a coating, and that coating will yellow quite often. So,
do you do the books as iBooks or anything like that, digitally?
No. We are all about the book as the object. So we're all about collectability. About if we could say what the smell would be like, we're thinking about doing a book called East London Smells, which is about the different aromas of East London. But we would like, it's all about the physicality of the touch, the collectability. We're not really interested in the e-books at all. It's kind of almost anathema to what we do. I mean, in 6 months we'll do an e-book, I'm sure, but for now we're not. It's not what we're about at all.
Do you sell prints for the books that you've done? Or
Sorry?
do you sell prints for the books?
Yeah, we do. You do. HOXTONMiniPress.com.
And what's the relationship with the print space?
There isn't one, and I'm not. No, there isn't one. We don't use the printer. We print them. I print them all on a big fancy inkjet in the office, so they're all printed one by one. We don't sell a lot of prints actually. We don't sell very much prints. We sell our books a lot, all over the country and around the world now, but we don't sell many prints. But the collector's editions we sell quite a lot, and they do have over there. You can get them. They have a print in each one, which is signed by the artist. And they're only £35. When am I meant to wrap up? I'm worried I'm boring people, or some people want to leave. Around about now. Should we just do 2 more questions? No one else wants to. Another question? Last question?
Have you been on the Joe Good show?
Yeah, I have, yeah. Joe Good is... sorry?
How long ago were you on that show?
Years and years ago. It's a radio station dedicated to dogs. No, it's a radio show dedicated to dogs, yeah. And they're kind of both barking, aren't they? The 2 women, they're completely barking, yeah. I was on that show and they asked me a question, and while she was asking me a question, she took out a dog treat from inside her bra and fed it to the dog that was underneath the radio table, and I was just like trying to sort of answer it seriously. It's quite amazing. So 2 more questions, yeah?
When you say East London about the press, you are strict, or for instance some project about Central London, North London?
No, it's about the books. So for example, I've lived in East London for 6.5 years. East London Swimmers, Portrait of Hackney, East London, Shoreditch Wildlife, East London, One Day Young in Hackney, pictures of mothers and their babies within 24 hours of birth taken in Hackney, drivers of the 1980s, photographs of people stuck in traffic jams in 1986 in Hackney. And then we have Hackney by Night, and Lost in the City, pictures of people lost in Hackney. A few of them are just outside Hackney, in Tower Hamlets, but you won't tell anyone. So yes, we do books just about East London, and we're wondering how long we can go.
What's the border? I mean, like something.
We don't have a border. It's just beyond Germany. We stop. We just kind of the spirit of East London. It's what we do. That makes sense. Why? Do you have a project that's just outside East London?
I was thinking about it. Something like, for instance, in Seven Sisters.
Yeah, that's East London. Yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah, we might expand slightly beyond the line of East London. East London. No, we wouldn't ever do West London. God forbid. Anyway, we do have for the books. If you want to get a book, they're over there. And if you want to pledge, you've got 39 hours left. But you can get a special deal with this. And there really only about 10 left of this. This is the very first copy that I... Anyway, thank you very much.